Ask the Podcast Coach for April 27th, 2019.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music. That means it's Saturday morning, 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I am Dave Jackson from the schoolofpodcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Cullison from the Average Guy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings. Happy Saturday morning to you, Dave, and happy, I think, Avengers Endgame weekend. I think everybody is talking about that. Holy cow.
All I know is my niece took a picture of herself, like post-movie, in tears. And she goes, I'm not ashamed to say I cried. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what the movie, I know what the movie's about, but I was like, okay, didn't expect that. So we'll see. I'll be really interested to see. I heard where some theaters are staying open 24 hours.
Yeah. There's such demand for it. It's crazy.
I know Troy Heinrichs from the Blacklist Exposed got tickets for he and his daughter to go see it at like 3 a.m. And I was like, really?
Yeah. It's going to shatter records. I mean, it's pretty incredible. Everybody's talking about it. It is it's interesting. It's the culmination of, 12 years of movies, right? And it is a testimony. I mean, they've had some bad ones in there. They've had some good ones in there.
Yeah. They
changed genres in the middle of it. Like, remember when Marvel movies were kind of serious and now they're complete joke, they're sarcastic, they do all these weird, these funny things in their movies. I think when we think about podcasting, you could look at that as an example of how do you stay fresh and relevant over the course of a decade? Well, Marvel has kind of done that. And they haven't, this movie, the final one, you'd think people would be burned out on this. It's going to do a gajillion dollars. It's crazy. So I think as podcasters, we can learn some lessons from sometimes you need to change things up. You need to try things new. You don't let failures get you down. If it didn't work, you cancel it. You kind of, there were some movies in there that, Hulk took 3 times to get started. Right. And so
that's true.
I just think there's some good lessons for Marvel. Somebody write that in a blog post or something.
Well, and the one thing they did, and this is kind of like I don't know if it's a new thing. I'd have to go back and see, but it's like the thing now. It's not. I have not seen the new movie, but if you haven't seen the next to the last movie, there are some people that don't make it ? To the next movie. Yeah. So like I think one of the things I was going to do an episode, and I don't think I'm going to do it anymore. What people can learn from Game of Thrones is the thing that blew me away was when you're in like season 1, I don't know, episode 3, and like they behead one of the main characters, and you're like, wait, what? They who? Dead? Like, well, I don't think he's coming back from that, So I think sometimes really throwing your audience a curveball can kind of suck them in, because then they're like, well, wait a minute, then anything's up for grabs. So
it's kind of like real life in the sense that, we don't live these perfect, not everybody. You kind of know, like in Endgame, I think you kind of know some people are coming back. I haven't seen the movie yet, so no spoilers.
Yeah.
But you with Game of Thrones, they would just kill off main characters, and you would be. And I think sometimes we have things in our podcasts that we probably need to just kill off, and maybe kill them off at the top. I think sometimes like we let the good things go too long. And then they lose, they kind of lose their luster, and letting them go at the top. Maybe Fallon does this a lot with the Tonight Show. They've had some segments that have been super popular that they just stopped doing, and they stopped doing them when everybody wants more.
Yeah,
So there may be something to that.
Yeah. Hey, if you want to join on in, we are at askthepodcastcoach.com/join. For anybody wondering, I am not using Spreaker today. I planned on it, but my laptop decided to be really, really temperamental this morning. And so we're back on Mixler if you want to listen to just the live version. And we actually did get some questions ahead of time. So I'm going to play one of these here real quick. This is from Paul.
Hello, Mr. Jackson. My name is Paul Perez. My podcast is the Improve and Have Fun podcast at improveandhavefun.com. And I just had a question. regarding trying to be on multiple channels. Now, I podcast and I have my website associated with the podcast. I do YouTube and I do Instagram as well. But of the three, of course, I get the most bites or the most downloads on through the podcast. But my question is, should I only focus on the podcast and not so much on YouTube or Instagram, since I don't get so much engagement there? Like kind of just like focusing on the one thing and just trying to get really good at the one thing? Or is it, in today's age, it's important to be on many platforms? So would love to hear your thoughts. And as always, thank you so much for everything that you do and all the help that you give so many of us. I'm a regular listener, and I've definitely implemented a lot of the stuff that you said on your podcast. Thanks for everything, Dave, and look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Paul. I'll give an example of this for me. I started playing on Twitch because I heard on Callie Lewis that like Twitch is going to be the history of the history. It's going to be the future of video. And like, it's just all things Twitch, all things video, and it's going to be huge. And Amazon, Twitch, video. So I jump over to Twitch, had to learn OBS a little bit, started playing with it. And there was just nobody over there. Like there are nobody over there looking for podcast stuff. It's all about gaming right now. And I understand that they're trying to change that perception. And if I go over and plant my flag right now, anybody looking for podcasting would probably find me. But for me, I was like, I don't know. I don't have the time. I guess it depends on if you have a lot of time or, by all means. I don't know. What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, no, I think you're right on with the time aspect of it. I post a lot of different places, Audio Boom, Audio Shout Engine, Mixcloud, Audio Mac, right? There are a bunch of different ones. Just this morning, I was checking my stats on Shout Engine, which is one of those, free services, whatever.
Yeah. 500
for the year so far. And you go, okay, do you want 500 downloads? Well, I mean, that's for some people, that's a lot, right? And so, yeah, you should post over there if you have the time, right? Yeah. YouTube, yes, definitely you should. And it all depends. How much do you promote it? How much are the people that are listening to your content? Are they there? You don't know until you try. And so I would say if you have the time, post as many places as you can. None of it really hurts you. You can be missing an audience. Do you have the time to do it?
Yeah, that's it. And I know I was interviewed on a show. Oh, I forget the name of it. And I was talking about, answer every email. Well, there are a bunch of millennials. And they're like, well, for us, that's probably going to be more Snapchat and maybe text. And I'm like, exactly. Go wherever your audience is. But if you're like, for me, I don't do much on Pinterest. No, let's make that more accurate. I don't do anything on Pinterest. Yeah. I kind of played with it and went, I don't get it, and was like, it wasn't getting
wildly popular. There's a group of people who it's all pins, right? It's all so you just got to kind of know your audience. I don't think it's a bad idea to be on Twitch and Mixer, by the way, Mixer. Sorry. Yeah. Mixer is Microsoft's version of Twitch. I don't think it's a bad idea to be on it if you have the equipment and the time. It takes an enormous amount of time to make sure all those things are working, right? And set up and it's actually working there. And then when you have problems, the worst thing is you go on a Mixer or a Twitch. It's a different set of technology stuff. Yeah. And if it doesn't work, then you're all thrown off. And right, I mean, you gotta weigh the costs.
And then in the chat room, they're saying Paul Colligan says this new media creation and distribution model dictates to be everywhere and syndicates to all sites. I would disagree with that. I would say be everywhere you can be well. Like right now, I'm like fair on Twitter. I'm definitely not great at it, but I'm okay. I log in like twice a week, but if I'm trying to think of another, I'm horrible at Snapchat. I fired it up twice and went, I don't get it. So the problem would be is if I go to a platform and then ignore it, then what if somebody's over there going, hey, Dave, I have a question about that. And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't see it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, and I have part of my core audience is on Twitter. And so I can't ignore it. But it's just a small segment. It's maybe 20 people. And so, but you got to kind of stay on it. I just consolidated I had 2 Twitter accounts, one for work and one, my personal one. And the one for work was just senseless. It was stupid. Like 2 Twitter accounts is dumb. Like, don't do that, people.
Yeah.
Just have one personality, right? We struggle with just the one we have. And so I closed it down, which was really funny because some people thought I was leaving Gallup. They're like, so where are you going? Like, what's no. I don't want 2 accounts. I just want 1 account. So I pared down to just 1, and man, it's actually freeing. You're like, oh, I just have to go one place to post things. This is great. So it can be freeing too to kind of simplify things.
Yeah, I used to start a Twitter account for every show.
Oh God.
And it was just like,
That's awful. Yeah, no, I did. You can't. It's unmanageable for most people.
Because originally I thought, well, what musician wants to hear about podcasting and wants to hear about faith-based stuff? And I'm like, so I started all these separate ones, and it was just a big headache and a nightmare. And
I did too. I didn't think my Gallup folks would want to hear about my tech stuff. But what I'm finding is there's huge crossover in that. And if I'm just true to all the channels, if you're just a real person in there anyways, I think people get past it. And if they don't follow you, well, their loss.
yeah.
Their loss. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Facebook's the other way, Dave. I remember the days when 7 and 8 pages, you're managing all these pages and these groups and stuff. Oh my God. Down to 1 group. I've wiped out all my pages. I'm really down to 1 group on the tech side now. On the Gallup side, we have probably 7 pages or 7 groups.
Yeah. I have 2 accounts. And in fact, if you see me on Facebook and it says David Jackson, you're on the wrong side, because that's my niece's nephew's family account. If you see Dave Jackson, that's the right one for podcasting stuff. Because I see on occasion somebody will, and it's the thing that I need to do is Dave Jackson needs to unfriend David Jackson, because what happens then is Dave, the niece and nephew guy, will post something and somehow it ends up on the other guy's wall because they're friends. And I'm like, and then people on the podcast side go, oh, I need to date. And then I'm back. But anyway, I did see this in the chat room. What will I be presenting at Podcast Movement? I believe the title is, does starting a podcast make you want to wet your pants? I believe that is the title that they chose. I have to double check.
I'm going to heckle you from the front row. I've decided that'll
be great fun. Throw things at me.
Yeah, just heckle. Just be sarcastic. Be the heckler.
Yeah,
it'd be great.
Royce says, do you guys use Buffer or Hootsuite, or do you post to Twitter manually each time? I'm a big fan of Buffer. The thing I like about Buffer is you can put in your RSS feed and then just go over and go, show me what's my recent post. Oh, let's put that one and that one and that one. I've heard, I used to use Hootsuite, and for me, it just sounded like I have Buffer on my phone. It just seemed like it was super easy to always just go, oh, here, hold on a second, send this to Buffer. And then there was a tool, I forget what it was, where I could say, hey, Buffer, go look at my followers and tell me when the best time to tweet is. And so it would then make the schedule. And I was like, well, that seems easy and fun. So that's what do you use, Jim? Or do you
Buffer for the tech stuff? And then at work, we use the enterprise version of Hootsuite.
Yeah.
I like both. They both have their place. In fact, if you're going to use the free versions of both, I think you get 10 free or something, like 10 or 15, something in there free, where you can schedule, because that's where they get you, right? When you're trying to schedule these posts, the more you want to schedule, then they start charging you. And if you use either one, you can stack up, you can kind of double it. Nobody knows where they're coming from. I mean, they kind of do, but they don't. You can stack them up. One caveat on that is I have watched people, and one in particular who was on my show, who I think got banned from Twitter for using those kinds of automation pieces. And you have to be careful not to post too much similar content via those engines, right? And there's a Jukebox and some other ones, right? I think Audience that will do this for you. I think you have to be kind of creative so Twitter doesn't recognize you as or think you are a bot. And if someone now complains about that, they'll ban you, which is really crazy on Twitter right now. So be really, really careful. The second part of that question was, or should I manually tweet? Yes, you should actually find some ways to manually tweet from time to time so that the algorithm doesn't see you as a complete tool or a bot all the time in what you're doing. So be careful.
And I forget, does Twitter own TweetDeck?
Oh, I don't know.
I think they, because I don't
know.
I fired that back up and it was like, oh yeah, this is actually a pretty cool tool if you actually want to like see who's DM'd you or whatever. And then I forgot the power of lists. It's just been a while since I was really like, hey, let's actually try to use Twitter for what it's used. Because if you follow so many people, your feed's just like, and you're like, okay. But
I can't keep up with my normal feed. I can't. You just can't do it.
Yeah. So I just make a couple lists of like, here's some podcast people that, the people that I really want to follow, the people that I didn't follow because they followed me, and I couldn't probably point you out in a lineup, that whole 9 yards.
Twitter changed their auto follow policy to a couple weeks ago to, I think you can only do 4,000 in a day now. It used to be 10,000. I think
that's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, but they'll also, if you use some of those tools to auto follow people, and it goes too fast, they'll block it. They'll block you and say, hey, we sense a bot is doing this. They kind of want you to do it. So be careful on that.
Yeah. Dan lets us know, yes, Twitter bought TweetDeck many years ago. So I've been, I tried to log into that at least, it'd be great if it was once a day. It's more like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's kind of one of those where it's like, oh, nothing's, things get slow at Libsyn. I'm like, oh, I should probably log into TweetDeck and make sure somebody didn't. Because what I found out is, somebody will, because that's where they are, and they'll send me a DM, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is from February.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
it is good to check. I find the website just fine, and I live on the notifications tab. So the notifications are really, if someone sent you a message or directly or, some of those kinds of things, there's a mail and a notifications tab. That usually is narrows it down enough for me to keep up with what's going on in the stream. If I try to actually be in the stream, those are like impossible rapids with sharp rocks and glass, and like it's just awful. But at least as far as keeping up with what's going on, that notification section for me works out pretty well. That's just kind of where I live.
Well, we've actually got another question that somebody sent. I don't know what. I just all of a sudden
this is awesome. Yeah, bring them on. Appreciate them this way. This is cool. It's a good way to do it.
Hey, Dave. My name is Oscar Paz, and I'm the host of the Peaceful Thrill Seeker podcast, which is, my podcast. Made it up. When it comes to getting interviewees, what are some good resources that I can use for, getting interviewees? Because my podcast deals with the theme park lifestyle or the Peaceful Thrill Seeker lifestyle. And so I'm trying to get interviewees that have knowledge of the roller coaster industry, as well as, people that are influencers in the industry, stuff like that. So what are some good resources for that? All right, thanks. Bye.
And so I have the website, podcastingresources.com. And if you go out there, there's a whole thing on guest booking. And some of those are things like the, interview valet and podcast connections and people that will actually go find you guests. And they'll also, if you want, you can hire them to have you find podcasts to be a guest on. Those are kind of expensive. His thing is about theme parks, and I was like,
roller coasters, is that what he said?
Yeah. So I'm like, I would see if there's any kind of Facebook groups.
It's gotta be
on theme parks or and I'm not sure what he's looking like. What's the one thing he didn't say is like, here's what I'm looking for in a guest, because he said influencers. I'm like, what's an influencer in a theme park? Is that somebody who designs the roller coaster? Or because that's the more niche you get, the trickier it's gonna get. But it'd be interesting. She's Elikqitie in the chat room says they're doing a crossover show soon, so that'll be interesting.
Well, that's cool. I think ask your audience who they want to hear. And I mentioned this last week in the show. I think that now I have my audience booking guests for me, which is super great. Like I'll be like, they'll be, hey, you should have so and so from such and such. I'm like, hey, would you reach out? And when those guests hear from listeners, because that's what they're interested in, right? How many of those emails do you get a day, Dave, of like, hey, I'm a big fan of your show, especially show number fill in the blank.
Right.
And then,
I wish I got that. I wish I had proof that they listened.
Well, I think I've even gotten those, and I know they're not. I know they're just they've done a search, they found the page, they're inserting the title of the post, and I especially love it when I get it and it says "Dear Average Guy." Like then I know, like, oh, you have not done any homework. So I turn those down. I just delete them. Right. I'm not going to listen to anybody that does it that way. But if I got a direct message from somebody on Twitter, or I got an email from a real person who said, hey, I listened to hometech.fm and I think I'm going to, would you be a guest on their show if I asked them? Yeah, for sure. So if you ask your audience, they may be like, oh yeah, I know so-and-so or such and such. It's a good way to get diversity in your kind of on your show. Cause I have a bubble. You have a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
I started going back and looking through. I have a spreadsheet of every guest I've ever had since show 100. I don't know why I didn't.
Wow.
I don't know why I didn't do 0 through 100 this way. But starting at 100, I've kept a spreadsheet of everything. We'll celebrate 400 this Thursday, which is pretty crazy. And that's a great list to go back. But I go back and I you can see some repetition in those, in the list when you're having the guests, and it's like, sometimes it's good to get outside the bubble. Get outside your own bubble. I think your audience can help.
Yeah, that would be a great place. Elikqitie in the chat room says that he's actually looking for people who create the roller coaster.
Wow.
So
that's got to be a niche.
that's
super niche. Wow.
Yeah, but
that's cool.
So I don't know if you go to Uncle Google and type in roller coaster designer.
I would think you would need to find a person because they all probably know each other. And so you got to find a person who knows a person who knows a person. I think that's such a tight community. You're probably going to have to do some investigative work to, hey, who do you know? That would probably be the right kind of audience because maybe they're in competition. I don't know. It's tough to do that with businesses to say, hey, who else should I, I know I just interviewed you about this router. Who else should I interview about routers? Well, okay, that's my competition, you jackass. So, you're kind of thinking along those lines. But in this community, maybe it's like podcasters where it's friendly and they would all be on the show.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if you could get a hold of anybody at a theme park. Like we have a really big one here in Ohio, Cedar Point, and it would be interesting to see if you could get anybody there, like a marketing person or anybody to say, hey, do you know, like a marketing person is meant to talk to people and say, I know it's not you, but do you know who I could talk to find out who it's going to be one of those days, who designed your latest big coaster, because we want to talk to the designer, because that way it sounds like you're going to get exposure. Because again, always explain things on how they're going to benefit. So if I talk to the designer of your latest, biggest, fastest coaster, they might know, or at least know who to get you in contact with. It's going to be really hard, no matter what you do, I think, to find those people.
Those are firms, not people now. It's not like Leonardo da Vinci, right? It's not one guy. He does everything, right? No, it's not like that anymore. It's probably a firm that has designers and engineers, and because that business is so dangerous. I mean, think of the litigation on that thing. Holy crap.
I know
that would be an interesting topic all in itself.
Yeah. I know somebody who sued and won a theme park because even though, I still don't understand how she won, but she hurt her back on something that did double loops and triple spins and whatever. And, so here in the chat room, they're saying you may want to contact some technical advisors for the old movie with Timothy Bottom's roller coaster. There we go. And
Working Cows podcast says, what about a theme park conference to network? And that's actually probably a really good, I bet they have an annual conference somewhere for theme park engineers or whatever.
Yeah. Something, but it'll be, that
would be an interesting conference.
That is a niche show.
What happens at that thing? Do you just like you come into a session and somebody just comes flying in on a
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of people come flying in, let's have our awesome supporters come flying into this point. Man, I can't believe it's almost 11 o'clock already. If you would like a monthly coaching session at a greatly reduced rate, you can be the teacher's pet. Go out to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And we always thank our $20 supporters. So these are awesome people like Greg over at debtshepherd.com, Glenn the Geek Hebert, who you will hear on Monday's School of Podcasting, or the week after that. He sent me an interesting clip that I want to use. You can find him at horseradionetwork.com, Josh Rivers over at podcastingexperiments.com, Max Trescott up in the air at aviationnewstalk.com, Shane from spybrary.com. Carrie Bond at keywestperspective.com/podcast. My buddy Ronsley down in Australia at the Amplify Media Group. Find him at mustamplify.com. Carl White's down in the Carolinas. Find him at Life in the Carolinas. That's with an S. Life in the Carolinas podcast.com. Kim Craggy at Toastmasters101.net. And if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, simply go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And thanks to everyone for being an awesome supporter. So Jason in the chat room says, I believe he's in China, if I remember right, this week. He's now listened to Ask the Podcast Coach in 10 different countries.
T-shirts on the way, Jason.
Yeah, that man gets around. Holy cow. Well, the one thing we haven't talked about yet today, which is all the above, the debate on Luminary. Are you in or are you out? And we talked about this on the Podcasters Roundtable. Ed Ryan wanted me to write an article on Luminary. And I said, if they would quit changing, I said, by the minute I write the article, it's changed. And this is a company that, thank goodness for James Cridlin. He wrote a really great article on podnews.net explaining what the heck is a proxy server. Because I was like, a what? A who? And that's where, here's some things. They used a proxy, I guess we'll just call it a server, to request podcasts, breaking stats, and dynamic advertising. They truncated the show notes, removing donation links. They incorrectly credited podcasters using the wrong information. They're disguising podcast downloads made by the app. In other words, instead of saying, hey, like if you go into Libsyn and you look at your user agents, instead of saying Luminary, it says things like, iTunes or core iTunes, something it doesn't say Luminary. And on the Android side, it's something else. They're increasingly being deserted by big names. Joe Rogan pulled a show. And originally I thought it was because of this proxy thing, which was breaking statistics. And I'm like, well, that makes sense, especially if you're on a CPM model and you have something that's breaking, like that's not tracking your downloads. That's a bad thing. And so I know a lot of people are pulling their stuff. I'm trying to find because James has a great.
Can you pull it? You just request that because I don't think I submitted to them at least one of my podcasts is in there. I see the video large feed is in there.
Yeah, one of the things that is kind of making them different, because on one hand, I've yet to have this confirmed. I've heard, or it's rumored, let's go that route to be even more accurate, that they're also going to play ads in between your episode, not in your episode, but when you go from this episode to the next one or the next show, that they are going to play an advertisement, of which, from what I've heard, you get zero. And the whole big thing was the original idea of Luminary is finding a good podcast is hard. We're going to have 40 of the best podcasts. You won't have to look. Just open up our app. Here's 40 podcasts. By the way, that some of those people are getting paid 6 figures and 7 figures to have their podcast there. And instead of doing that, they pulled, like a lot of apps do, Pocket Cast, Overcast, they pulled the back end of iTunes, Apple Podcasts. So everybody's show got added. Oh, and by the way, while you're there listening to my show, I'm going to keep poking you to give me $8 a month to listen to these 40 shows that you can't hear. And that's where some people are like, well, because I'm not getting a dime of that $8 that you're getting. So that's the debate. So
interesting. They've pulled in my video RSS feeds and have made them audio there. So I have a video large and a video small. No video, but so I have 3 feeds because they've grabbed all 3 of my RSS feeds and pulled them in for Home Gadget Geeks. Interesting. So the premise, right, is what people are upset about is they've taken these and not only are they exposing them for other people to listen to them, but they may be adding their own ads that they're not sharing with the content providers. Is that pretty much, does that sum it up?
Yeah. And that's where people go, well, that's what Stitcher does, right? Stitcher plays ads in between your episodes.
You have to submit to Stitcher, right?
Then that's where we go. Yep. You're not in there automatically. So was the big thing. We're like, wait a minute, we have to, and they didn't, they just pulled stuff. And so it's different. And then the fact that for me, it's like, it just screams. And this is the company that got $100 million, by the way, to start. And so this is one of those where it just, to me, reeks of somebody who got into podcasting who just doesn't understand it at all. I mean, it's the ultimate. It's like, sorry, that's, well, first of all, we're going to put in a proxy server. So that way you can't tell where your downloads are coming from. And by the way, I know it's Dave Jackson and Jim Collison, but we're just going to put some other name from who knows where we're getting that information from. And then it's just like, oh my God, are you kidding me? So every time I went to write about it, it was like, well, first we thought they were making copies of our files. And that's when we figured out this proxy server thing. And then they said, oh, oops, sorry. And then they fixed it. And so now they're kind of back to this, but it was just like, for me, and so people were asking me, well, Dave, are you going to pull your stuff? And for me, I am selling the School of Podcasting. I'm selling my consulting. So the more people that hear that, I don't really care that I'm not getting paid for the ads, yada, yada, yada. The more people that hear me, the better the chance that people are going to sign up for the School of Podcasting. But if I said, what about my Logical Weight Loss show? And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm not making any money with that. And if these people are now making money off my show, shouldn't I get a piece of that? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, so if you want to pull your show, this is, to me, it's the ultimate podcasting depends.
Mm-hmm.
If this bothers you, by all means, you can go over, and I forget where you go, but you contact them and say, hey, here's the name of my show. Here's my RSS feed. I honestly swear to uphold the whatever that I am the owner of this feed, because otherwise they can't make it too easy. Because otherwise I could go over and just say, hey, could you pull all my competition? That would be bad. So you have to kind of prove that you are the owner of the feed. And then I don't know how long it takes, but I know James Cridlin had somebody who had a similar show to his and was using his name, basically. We can talk about that in a bit. And Jason is saying he's trying, because Jason has 16 shows on his network. Says, I'm trying to have mine pulled, but haven't gotten a response to my removal. And that was sent 3 to 4 days ago.
Yeah, they have a RSS feed questions section in their FAQ. And it says, if you'd like to remove your podcast from our community of hundreds of thousands of free podcasts, please email the following information to copyright@luminarypodcast.com. Give us your name, the name of your podcast, your RSS feed, and iTunes ID, and a statement that you own and control the podcast you submitted. So that's the process.
Yeah. So, and then we don't know how long that's going to take. This made me go over and look at Castbox. Remember Castbox? Mm-hmm. The School of Podcasting is listed in that app 3 times. And I was like, and part of me wanted to go, I should go over them and say, hey, can you whittle me down to 1, please? And then I thought about it and I looked at how many people are actually listening on Castbox. And I went, you know what? Whatever. There's nobody.
Does it really matter? I mean, if the tree falls in the forest and no one's there, does it, make a sound? I don't know. I'm looking at Luminary. I'm trying to think of what would be the disadvantage to me for them promoting my podcast without my permission. I don't think I gave them. I could have. I don't think I did.
No. But
I'm trying to think, what's the disadvantage to that? What would, besides them inserting ads that I'm not making money for, which I don't really want to be honest. The kind of podcasting I do, the less 1099s I need to fill out at some get at some point, the better. Just So, anyways, I don't know. I think I would leave it if you're trying to get exposure. If you're okay with the ads being inserted, I guess if your audience contacted you and complained, hey, I was listening to you on Luminary and they got these really obnoxious ads.
Yeah.
Okay,
that would be it.
Yeah. Then maybe pull it. At that point, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I'm at this point, I'm team B everywhere. But again, that comes from I think if I was doing CPM and they messed up my stats, then I'd have a problem. But now apparently they have that fixed. So my CPM ads and my dynamic ads are going, which I still don't. Yeah.
As they're coming through your RSS feed, they would be pushing a user agent through to your stats in theory, right?
Right.
So would you see Luminary show up as a
No.
user agent?
That's the thing
Is that
that
the problem with pushing it through a proxy? Were they blocking that, or
yeah.
I'll have to listen to it? Was this week's Podcasters Roundtable probably coming out here pretty quick?
Yeah, and I'll put a link here. If you go to Pod News and just do a search for proxy server, that will probably get you there. It's a pretty, because James does a really good, because I even asked, we're all like, where's Daniel when you need him? Because that's that's above my pay grade. Like, what is a proxy server? And he explains how it basically somewhat masks.
It can.
Yeah. And that's part of their problem is they're, for whatever reason, they're somewhat trying to mask their activity. And I think some of that, and again, I don't know, but it seems like they're making it hard for us to see exactly how much, activity. Like, they don't want Rob to be able to say, well, we got 0.007% is from, Luminary.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. Yes, here we go. From James Cridlin from podnews.net. The Android app is now calling itself Exo Player Audio Player. And the audio library that they've used. We've also tested in the iOS app, which identifies itself as Apple Core Media /1.0.0.16. So it's kind of like either A, whoever designed their app is an idiot, which isn't a good first impression. And he said requests by Luminary servers for the podcast RSS feed are also hidden with no Luminary user agent. As a result, podcast hosts cannot monitor traffic from Luminary, or if they wanted to, block it. So it's just, again, it's just a giant, like, wow. Well, why are you making it so hard, kids? Meanwhile, Swoot and Podcoin are, I'll be interested to see how much traffic we get from Swoot, which is, to me, have you heard about Swoot?
No.
Swoot is this app, and here's the big thing. You know what's missing? I was listening in Overcast the other day, and I thought to myself, I wonder what Jim Collison is listening to right now. And you know what? I could go to Swoot and find out. See what all your other friends are listening to. And I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. I remember the days back when Apple was new and you could subscribe to a show, and it said people that subscribe to this show also subscribe to this. And I'm like, so I get that, but not enough to make me switch apps. And then Podcoin is an app that makes you, well, it doesn't make you. You have to opt in again. And from where I understand, I might have this guy on the School of Podcasting, but I told him, I said, here's what I'm asking. And that is, it seems like as a listener, you earn Podcoin, which can be used towards things like Amazon gift cards. And as a podcaster, as a producer, you get paid when people listen to your show in the form of Podcoin, which can be used for things like an Amazon gift card. And I was like, okay, so we're paying the listener, we're paying the producer. And I'm like, what's the business model?
Well, it's got to be advertising. It has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not there yet. I mean, they have some funding to get this thing rolling, but then once they get enough people and they're using it and they're getting paid for it, they'll go to advertisers and say, hey, look, we've got this kind of engagement. You do one in. It may actually, Dave, be a pretty good accountability model for both podcasters and listeners, because wouldn't it be great if you could at least get some kind of credit for listening to something? It'd be on a player where you're like, okay, I'll tolerate a 30-second ad if it gets me at the end of the month a $10 Amazon gift card. If I'm already listening to 7 podcasts or 10 podcasts a week, and I can make $10 doing it, I like that motivation that's associated with that. From a podcaster standpoint, wouldn't it be great to say, hey, I'll make some money that way, whatever. So yeah. I like the idea, but I can't think of any other monetization model except advertising is coming. Yeah. Coming soon.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. Near you. We have somebody coming in here, the one and only Elikqitie. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you doing, Dave?
Good. What can we help you with?
So I have a question about sponsors because hold on one second. Let me put on my app so you can hear me better.
She's changing. She's changing over devices. Yeah.
So I have a question about sponsors. So I know you don't make $1 gazillion off sponsors, but I'm looking for sponsorship to cover my basic podcast cost. And I was thinking about asking, because I have interviewed people that have products, like companies that have gluten-free products, because my show is travel gluten-free. And so I was thinking about asking them first. But how do you go about, like, should I ask the people I interview to sponsor me? Or, because I have working relationships with some of them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you should. Yeah, you should ask everybody that you have on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so anybody else besides people I have on, like, how do you go about, like, cold calling people? Do you guys ever go about cold calling people for sponsorships? And if you do, what's your process?
I think one of the cool things that Allie from, I know her from Australia. I can't remember. It's some sort of health thing. And she will basically go buy the product, take a picture of herself, like, I love this stuff, and then put it on Facebook and Twitter and tag the company and like, hey, would you like to sponsor my podcast? And she says that seems to at least get their attention and get the conversation going, and in some cases work. I would start with products that you like. Like if there's a product you like, oh man, I love this gluten-free whatever, I would go and contact that company and say, hey, I do a show. I have your target audience, and I would love to talk about this on my show. My fees are X amount per episode, blah, blah, blah. Is there somebody I could talk to about this? Or maybe not even start off with pricing, just start the conversation.
Yeah, because I actually did get asked by a company because I tag people companies all the time in my Instagram post. And I actually just got asked by a company a couple of weeks ago if I wanted to come and like take a tour of their factory.
There you go.
Yeah. And I have them on first. So they'll almost always say no to money. Mm-hmm. So if you just called hey, I have a $500, sponsorship slot. Like you got to make 1,000 calls to get somebody to say yes one time on that one. But you probably make 10 calls to get them to say yes. If they fit what in what you're doing, to say, hey, I'd like to have you on in a little 15-minute guest spot to talk about what you're doing. Then you've started that relationship. And I've always had much better luck if I'm asking for something for it after I've had them on the show and say, hey, this worked out really, really well, and I'd love to be able to support you more or advertise for you more on this. Would you be willing to? And then make sure you've got a media kit, so to speak, on your site that has this all laid out. Like, you have to be careful. Once you put your media kit on, it'll get crawled, and then you're going to get all kinds of people wanting to figure out how to spam that address and get their advertising on there. So you may get more people wanting to do it than you're actually interested in, and this is not good at kind of advertising. But have some kind of regular rate and you're just saying, hey, you can be my host sponsor, and I'll mention you every week or whatever you decide you're going to do. But have them on first. That's worked well for me.
Okay. And then what do you don't put your pricing on your media kit? It's just for media purposes.
You could, if you want to. I think that's a strategy. If you want to, I've got this sponsorship at this level.
And then when you sell your sponsorships, do you sell them in packages of like 4 shows, 8 shows, or do you sell for like time? How do you?
I sold mine for a year.
Okay.
So I just said, hey, a year's worth of it, and I made them really reasonable, and they weren't really that hard to sell when I wanted them.
And did you do more than one sponsor per episode, or did you do exclusivity?
I've almost always done just one, but that's not on purpose. I don't know, Dave, you've done a bunch. What do you feel about multiple?
Yeah, I just do one because the other sponsor is always the School of Podcasting. So, and it's only a 40-minute show. So, and then what I usually do is I do a minimum of a month, and then it's up to them at the end of the month if they want to come back or whatever. Like I have Focusrite is coming back, so, and it's really a matter of, and then what you can do also is you can say it's X amount of money to be on the podcast. It's X amount of money to be in the newsletter. It's X amount of money to have a link in the show notes, and then put make sure that they know it's an actual link, not a no follow link, because that means they're going to get Google juice from that. And then say, or, for one low monthly fee, you can have all of these for this. And so that way they go, oh, we want the package. We want the newsletter. We want the podcast, and we want the link in the show notes.
Yeah, just Elikqitie, make it drop dead simple for them. No,
Yeah.
these guys, they don't want to think about it. They just want to write a check and be done and know they're getting some value. So don't make it too complicated. Kind of just make it easy for them to say yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then have one of those, how can have maybe even your media kit. How can we move forward? Contact me here to create the campaign. I will need the following: an image that is blah 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 by blah 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 pixels. We will need your 4 talking points, not 10, not 12. We need your 4 talking points, and blah blah. That way they know exactly what they're getting into, what you need to, and it just creates it removes a lot of the back and forth of like, no, that's not the right image. Oh wait, no, that's not going to work in the show notes or whatever. So.
Okay, cool. Awesome. That was really good info. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
You
Oh,
bet.
you're
Thanks
welcome.
for jumping in. Good to see you.
Happy Saturday morning.
Hear you. Yeah, happy to you as well.
Yeah, I just rolled out of bed. There's no way I'm doing video.
No
this
worries. I did too. So take care.
Have a good one.
All right. We'll see you.
And then next up, we have Luka. Luka, thanks for coming to Ask the Podcast Coach. What can we help you with?
Hi. So I'm a very new podcaster. I'm starting a new podcast called The Chill Zone on Anchor, not sponsoring anything. I know that, Dave, you've had beef with Anchor.
Don't get him started. Don't get him started.
I'm in my head. I'm like, okay, just listen.
We'll ignore you said that. Just keep going.
Sorry. But is there any other recommended podcast places where it's maybe low price for me, but still good for starting podcasters?
Okay, first question always, why are you starting the podcast?
Well, kind of welcome to the UK. But I'm kind of saying because I listen to the news, and to be fair, we've got Brexit currently.
Right.
People want to talk about other things instead of Brexit. So that's why I came up with the idea of making a podcast so we can talk about other things instead of just Brexit all the time.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, if you really must have a free version of your podcast, let me see if I can find, because there's a lot of A's in this name and I can't remember. It's Wooshka, and I believe it's 2 A's. Let me double check here. Yes, WHOOSHKAA. So it's a weird name. I think they're out of Australia. And this is the thing I never get around the Anchor conversation, is why people aren't going, if you want free, go over to Wooshka, because they don't own your show in Apple Pod. They don't do all this stuff, quote, for you that then later screws you. And it's a little more like a traditional podcast. Now, they're just as likely to go out of business as anybody else. I know there was another one that I'd not even heard of, another free media host that went out of business this week. But if you need a free media host and you're like, Dave, you hate Anchor, but I got to do free, Wooshka. Knowing that Dave hates all free media hosts, but it's not a better bad choice. Yeah,
it's not a great plan. Anchor, I have noticed, is really back down on this, at least in the stuff, because I still, I post out there. I use them just so I kind of keep track of them. And I just post it. I just use their free plan. I don't use them for my RSS feed, but they've really backed down on the aggressiveness of posting to iTunes for you and for some of those other things. Mm-hmm. So maybe they're listening from that. Look at the point on Anchor is that if they submit to all those things for you, you don't own, if they submit to iTunes and these other places, they own it, not you. Then that's the big beef a lot of people have. So just be careful there. If you're going to use them, just be careful. But there's a whole host of free, I mentioned these from time to time. I use SoundCloud for just 2 podcasts. I just keep 2 out there rotating through, right? It gives it doesn't stay out there very long, but it gives people a chance to find me on SoundCloud, Mixcloud, Shout Engine, Audio Mac. Those are all kind of host providers that you can put things on. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, the thing you want to keep in mind with, especially with Shout Engine will not redirect your feed. In fact, I've had a few people at Libsyn go, is anybody home at Shout Engine? And I'm like, I don't know. They're like,
no, that thing's on autopilot. But here's the deal. You don't use those for hosting. You use them for visibility. So this morning I was logging into Shout Engine as I was posting my own out there. I've had 500 listens on Shout Engine. I tweet it once a week. I do the tweet to it. Hey, 500 from since the beginning of the year. Not too bad to have that kind of traffic out there. Now, again, my podcast does not live there, and I would recommend you spend $10 to $20 on one of these host providers: Spreaker, Blueberry, Libsyn, Podbean. Like, just if you're going to spend any money anywhere, spend a little bit on hosting. I use Maple Grove Partners, so it's worth a little bit of money to do that, and then you can distribute it out everywhere else that you want. But they don't own anything.
The other thing just to keep in mind here is this is my Anchor account with it's a real podcast, but it's a fake person. It's Carl Spackler does the Fat 50 and Frisky show, because I don't like I don't like babysitter porn,
Oh my God.
Anyway, but if you take my 19 cents that I've earned so far and divide that by the 71 plays, I am making 0.002 cents per download. Now, if we times that by, let's say, 300 downloads, which is actually pretty good if you're just starting out, I would make 80 cents per show.
But Luka, you're not thinking going to Anchor to make money off advertising. You're just going to use them as a way to distribute, right?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and that'll work. It will work. Here's the deal, though, with Anchor as well. They just got bought, right?
Right.
So we don't know where that's going to go. We don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty to what's going on in Anchor. So that, again, anchoring to Anchor may not necessarily be your best. But again, you've got to get, this is just marketing at the end of the day. If you want to get things out, and you just got to get this thing in front of as many people as you can, using as many methods as you can to spread the word. There's no magic to that. It's just a bunch of hard work.
Yeah. The reason I got Anchor itself as an app, because I've gone on my phone as well, is because I was looking at another podcast. I'm not going to say the podcast over air, but they were completely advertising them. So I thought, this might look good. And then I looked at a few videos and I was like, yes. But then I found they were always Anchor made. And then I looked at the people who didn't actually own anything in Anchor, and it wasn't the best.
Yeah, the median download for shows on Anchor is 0.
Yeah.
That's the part that according to Rob at NAB, that apparently somebody with a popular app, which would be able to look at all the different platforms, gave the numbers, and they said, yeah, if you look at, I'm not sure how you get an average of 0, but
we got to remember, Anchor was built to be bought. That's why they built this thing. So they went in there, they threw a bunch of money at it. They were trying to sell this thing from the day they opened it. And so they did all kinds of trickery to get people on there, and they put a ton of marketing. This is why marketing works, when you throw a ton of money at it, and they did, and it worked. But it didn't attract very short-term podcasters, and which again by itself is you don't care that it attracted short-term. Your podcast is the one that matters. You just don't get great tools there. I mean, with Libsyn and Blueberry and Spreaker, you get such great tools for podcasters. So,
and I know. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, just Pippa is another podcast media hosting that just got bought by Acast. And what's interesting is Acast said, we believe that Pippa fits into our culture, which is interesting because Pippa was started by guys that went around and scraped RSS feeds and spammed podcasters. And I'm like, that's the culture? Like, hey, those guys are kind of slimy. You guys will fit right in. I'm like, that's kind of different. But anyway, go ahead, Luka.
Yeah. So in the UK, we have a gigantic radio corporation called the Global Radio Player. They basically bought adverts from these different podcasters, and they're like, which one pleases us in a way that we want to produce it? And they saw potential in Anchor, and they were like, because they can make good logos, they can produce some good things, we'll buy into it. But as I've seen the reviews, I've kind of gone back from thinking, Anchor's good to Anchor's considerate. Let's ask someone else of their view and just show it, because I want to be quite successful in just getting the word out that we have something else apart from Brexit here.
Yeah.
And we can talk about whatever. Let's say we want to talk about organic vegetables or whatever, anything. We can just say it on here, and it's not always Brexit, Brexit, Brexit. But then listening to the advertising and the actual potential that they receive, and they've not had the best. Oh, let's look here. Look at these people. And I've heard apparently that they are that they're presenting more of the people who actually include Anchor subscriptions.
Yeah, it's a feed, with their feeds. Yeah, there's all those kinds of considerations that you have. To be honest with you, you can go crazy thinking about this, and I think the hosting decision, if it's gonna tie you up, just make one. Like, just make a decision, because the most important thing you're going to do is what is yet to come. You've got to make these podcasts, and that really, beyond hosting is such a small, tiny decision. And I know the hosting companies hate me for saying this, but it's an important one to make in the very beginning. But make it, get over with it, and then move on, because you got a whole bunch of marketing and a whole bunch of creation to do. That's the hard part. Like, choosing a host provider, easy. Making content, way harder. So make a decision. Don't lose any more sleep over it. Make it today. Just decide what you're going to do. Make it today and get making content, right? Stop worrying about who's going to advertise on what and where. You're a new podcaster. Most of that stuff doesn't matter anyways. If you get really good and you get popular, you're going to move host providers anyway. So like, I wouldn't get, I don't know, Dave, I just wouldn't get too hung up for too much longer on so many people obsess over this, and you're like, it has so little to do with your content.
Yeah, I always just say, if you're happy giving up your the fact that you're not going to have stats in Podcast Connect, you're not going to have stats in Stitcher.com.
That's not true. That's not true. You don't have to let Anchor do those things for you. You can say no to it.
That is true.
You can go in and say no, and I'm going to do it. So don't just the thing is they were tricking people into doing that. Like, hey, sign up for our awesomeness, and we'll take care of everything for you. And you click that button, and they were doing it all. That was deceptive, right? Yeah, that's terrible.
If you're happy having very basic numbers, if you're happy with a company that hasn't made any profit, if you're happy with a company that changes the format of your file, if you're happy with a company that stops you from receiving email, that's another one. They put, like, you'll sign up with an email address, and that's not the email that's in your RSS feed. So if Apple, for some reason, goes, this is the best thing ever, you're not talking about Brexit, they're going to have a heck of a time getting in touch with you.
That's not great.
That's where I just say, if you're going to if you must use a free service,
don't.
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 Yeah. Quit drinking coffee.
Pay a little bit.
$5.
It's cheap. It's $10 in most cases. Yeah.
Yeah. So
sacrifice something for it and pay a little bit, and do. If you think you're going to do this for a while, get a plan somewhere, and go with the pros.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yes, that does. That's all my questions.
All right.
Thanks.
All right.
You bet. Great hearing from you.
Yep.
Take care.
See you guys later.
Take care. Wow, 2 calls.
2 calls. Look at
that's
that.
Pretty great.
Yeah.
That's pretty great. And me calling you out live on the I've had people say they appreciate that we don't agree on everything here. Right. And so I'm not afraid to say, I don't know if that's totally true. But
that is true. Cause when I say, hey, they own your stuff, it's like, if you do the thing, and that's,
I'm glad trickery. Like,
that
was the thing. They were doing this trickery. I think that trickery is kind of stopped, by the way. I think
I'll have to go sign up again. Cause I remember the last time I signed up at Anchor, I'm like, oh, here we go.
Well, when I submit a show, it used to be super like, hey, do you want a super awesomeness for us to do everything for you? That button's gone. So I don't know, like I have to find it. I have to dig to get that. So maybe some things that's why I post to all of these is so every week I see what's going on with them. Otherwise I wouldn't know. They make changes. The fact that podcasts.com hasn't changed in 4 years. It's the exact same site. They've done nothing to. There's nobody home. Same with Shout Engine, like you mentioned. Yeah. Shout Engine hasn't changed in 3-4 years. Like nothing has changed.
No, so, that's the one.
But you don't know if you're not on them. So that's why I like to be on them.
And I would have to look at Mixcloud to make sure. It's like you said, don't use these as your primary thing, because I'm not sure how 301 redirect.
No, I wouldn't use I wouldn't use any of them as my host provider. Jason said in the chat, Mixcloud had scraped his site and was using it. I wouldn't use any of them as my host provider, but I probably get 1,500 extra downloads a year, maybe more, through these services. Well, that's more than a lot of people getting downloads. So
yeah,
I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Jim, what's coming up on the AverageGuy.tv?
Oh, we're back to community episode. Oh, I mentioned next week, 400. So if you want to come out Thursday night, 8 p.m. Central, the AverageGuy.tv/live, we're celebrating 400. I'm bringing some hosts back who are on the original show number 1.
Wow.
And we're going to spend a little time reminiscing, but a lot of tech. So the AverageGuy.tv.
Yeah, we will definitely have a show next week. May 11th is a question mark, because I'll be. Does Motel 6 have hotel Wi-Fi?
I don't.
Yeah, that was my thought.
Don't
I'll be watching my stepson graduate from Purdue that weekend.
Oh, cool.
And if I can get to someplace with Wi-Fi, I'll try it. But that could be. We'll figure that out. But that's in 2 weeks.
Yeah. We'll figure it out.
This week on the School of Podcasting, it's either going to be my show about interviewing, or I'm not going to talk about Luminary. It'll be my show about interviewing. So stick around for some post show.